Okay, good morning, good morning, good morning, students. So is everyone here in the meet already? Okay, class monitor, just check the attendance after the meet, ha? Okay, so, and tell your classmates that, to those who hasn't been here to, be right here na in our meet for today, so that 5 minutes from now we can start the class, okay? Okay. So now that everybody is present, so please, for the prayer, please lead Mr. Class Secretary. Kindly lead the prayer. Okay, amen. So before we begin, always mind the proper netiquette, ha? Proper netiquette when it comes to virtual meets like this. And if you want to say something, just raise your hand and turn on your mics. If you are not asked to talk or to speak, just mute your mics, so that um there will be no noise or any disturbances in the middle of this virtual meet. Okay? Okay, very good. So last meeting, we have talked about the different elements of the state. So who can remember or who can give us a rundown about what are the different elements of the state? Okay, Miss Treasurer. Okay. Okay, very good, no? So I hope you understood last week's lesson completely so that now we can move on to a new one. So before I start, I would like to ask you what are your notions or your ideas about these two words inherent power? Inherent power. What comes up in your mind when you hear these two words? Any ideas? Okay, raise your hands if you want to talk. Okay, very good. So most of your ideas are really good, and thank you for sharing all of that. And now moving on to our lesson proper. I give you the topic, let us read first the objectives for today's class. Okay, for the objectives, kindly read. Everybody, just turn on your mics. Okay, so all of those objectives will be possible and will be reached if all of us will participate in today's lesson. Okay, so what is inherent? So what does it really mean? And what are the inherent powers of the state? So that is our lesson for today, the different inherent powers of the state for our subject, Philippine politics and governance. So we've talked about the elements of the state, and now let us move on. So here's a diagram the various about the different icons that represents the three inherent powers of the state. So we have a government, we have a piso, and we have a warrior, and the words property and safety. And in the middle of it is the coat of arms of the Republic of the Philippines. So first, let's talk about the various. We also have funds, we are very familiar with that property, funds, and safety. So what are these words really mean? So what are the similarities of these powers? So they are basically inherent, just as we talked about a while ago. Inherent is something that's indispensable, so meaning it cannot be removed. So it is essential to each and every state. And these are methods of the government to interfere with private rights, and they all presuppose an equivalent compensation for the private rights interfered with. They're exercised primarily by the legislative branch of the state. So there are three branches, right, of the state, three branches of the state or of the government: the judicial, the executive, and the legislative. So what are the limitations of these powers? So these powers can't be exercised to trample rights guaranteed under the Bill of Rights. And exercise of these powers is subject at all times to the limitations and requirements of the Constitution. So let's start with police power. So it is the power to enact and enforce the law for regulation of public order and welfare. So as we all know, the number one role of the police is to enforce law and to bring safety and peace and prevent chaos from happening in our society. Which chaos really is inevitable in our society. That's why they're there to mitigate or prevent from happening. So with police power, we have the PNP, we have the AFP, and we have the National Bureau of Investigation, so Philippine National Police, the Armed Forces of the Philippines, and the National Bureau of Investigation. So that are like the three main branches of the police power in the Philippines. So the characteristic of police power is that it is considered the most pervasive, the least limitable, and the most demanding power because safety is, of course, pejorative or not pejorative, no, is imperative to everyone. So it is indeed demanding, right? and is dynamic. Police power is dynamic, not static, and must move with the moving society it is supposed to regulate. So police power may sometimes use taxing powers and implement for the attainment of legitimate police objectives. Of course, they need taxes in order for them to regulate, for them to move or, operate as an organization in this government. So let's move next to the power of expropriation, or otherwise known as the power of eminent domain. So it is the power to take private property for public use, basically. So that's the simplest meaning for this inherent power of the state. It basically uses, for example, your own private property. The government will buy that in order for it to be used by the public. For example, if your house is alongside the road and your house is potentially blocking the road, so not really your house or maybe a piece of your land, so they will take it and they will compensate you with the right amount so that development can happen. So yeah, we have the president. Those who exercise these powers are the president, the House of Representatives, basically the judicial, the land registration and land registration authority. I think this is my NILAD or the water utilities, um, telecommunications, railways or transportation, even the LTO, and the electric cooperatives in our country. So the requisites of appropriation, the needs or the things to consider when it comes to taking up private property is of course necessity, private property, and just compensation. So just compensation basically is the compensation or the payment or the compensation in which they can provide in order to compensate the amount or the value of the private property that they're taking. And it is also done by due process of law, of course. So next is the power of taxation. This is the most very important thing. Power of taxation. So basically, it is the power to impose and collect revenues for the operation of the government and for the people. So of course, all of that we have are powered by taxes. The things, the schools, why we're here is why are we enjoying the free higher education? It's because of the taxes of the people. So we should be thankful for all of that. So the BIR, or the Bureau of Internal Revenue, is the responsible one, of course, in collecting and assessing and imposing taxes to be used for public operations of the government. So the purpose of taxation is to raise funds to support the government and the services of the public. So that's why pay your taxes when you are able to. So the importance of taxation is derived from the unavoidable obligation of the government to protect the people and extend its benefits. So of course, if there is no tax, so everything will be stagnant and wala, nothing will happen to us. So the nature of taxation is inherent in sovereignty, and essentially it is a legislative function. So if a country is sovereign, so it can impose its own taxes to its people. So those were the three inherent powers of the state. So for your activity, answer this question. So how does the three inherent power of the state affect our lives as citizens of the Philippines? But before that, let us have a little generalization first before we begin with the activity, no? So what have you realized with all of the things that we've talked about? Okay, raise your hand if you want to answer. Okay, very good, Another question. So does each inherent power rely on each other? It does. So all of it will rely in each other. So you can basically answer that, by if one power is not there, so the other two cannot function as well. So in conclusion, these three inherent powers of the state are important and essential to a country's general well-being, and one cannot exist without the other. So yeah. So I hope you understood for today's lesson, and for your activity here, just screenshot it if you want to. So I'll explain it. So how does the three inherent powers of the state affect our lives as citizens of the Philippines? So write and type it on your essays as an essay on a short bond paper. Use the font Arial 12 and limit your answers to 10 to 15 sentences only. Ha, don't want more than that because it's tiring to read, and there's so much of you in this class. Okay, and submit it at our Google Classroom tomorrow before 11:59 a.m. Okay, before 12 noon. Okay, is that clear? And for your assignment, just research about the rules of power by Niccolo Machiavelli. Okay, is that great? Okay, so now I think class monitor just sent me the list of the ones who attended our class today, and class dismissed. You may now leave the meeting. Thank you.